We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Well, I'm watching the throw, and it's funny because you could see Plax has like a complete beat on the throw, and there's like no Falcons in the picture yet. And you're just like, well, when is someone going to step up? It's like they're all were just hanging out at the goal line, which is, obviously worked out. But I mean, if he catches that ball 1 foot deeper, it's a touchdown.
This is Remember That Game, the podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe chart the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick. For this one, we'll throw back to a recording with Hribar, who came on to talk through the fantasy angles of Michael Vick versus Tommy Maddox and the big finish with Plaxico Burress there, going through the process in an interesting time and place in the league. Recorded this one back in 2020. Hope you enjoy. Author of the Worksheet at Sharp Football Analysis and the Swami of Konami, Lord Reeves, how do you feel about diving into the very strange and distinct part of Steelers and NFL history that is 2002?
Yeah, this is a fun game on a lot of levels because it was that weird tie, exciting plays, a fourth quarter comeback. Tommy Maddox had come off the XFL. This is, we had a little Konami action with Mike Vick. There's a lot going on here to digest in this game, and it's a really fun football game. It's, for a regular season game. It's probably one of the more underrated regular season games. And the Steelers and Falcons have a couple of these. They played 4 years later and played like a 41-38 shootout. So they delivered. We need to get these guys on the field more together.
Yeah, and then 2010 also overtime. So they play each other. Each time goes to OT, a thriller, different players involved. And in 2002, a bit of a transition year in Steelers and Falcons history, too. The first year, Michael Vick as a full-time starter. And when Tommy Maddox becomes the full-time starter, 2002 ends with Brad Johnson quarterbacking a 27-point Super Bowl win and the Cleveland Browns making the playoffs. So you almost wonder which plane of existence this occurs on. And in Week 10... one of the stranger games in memory, Falcons visiting Pittsburgh, both squads coming off 4-game win streaks. Tommy Maddox, the still reigning XFL MVP. Michael Vick, the number 1 draft pick of the Falcons a couple years earlier. Interesting period between Cordell and Ben-led teams and the Dick LeBeau defensive eras in Pittsburgh. With what clarity do you remember where you were on this autumn day?
Oh, man, it's tough to say. I mean, I'm 20 at this time, so I'm really on the cusp. I'm 20 years old at this time, really on the cusp of, having fun and doing stuff. Probably was out on Saturday night, having a good time, watching the game, probably, at home, watching the games that is. I don't remember if this game was on or not locally at the time. I would doubt it was. Being where I am, outside of Cleveland, the Browns probably occupied that time slot on CBS, I'm guessing at that time. But no, I don't exactly remember where I was, but I can remember them cutting to like in and out of plays for the game, especially in the overtime.
I recommend everyone read your Dynasty buy-sell articles for Sharp Football Analysis. I'm guessing if you were writing this column in 2002, Heinz Ward and Plaxico Burress, and not knowing what Michael Vick had in store, they would all be buys.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers, when I rewatched this game too for this, the Steelers offense was really fun, at this time, and they weren't just fun because they had fun players, like they ran fun plays. I mean, in this game, we had Heinz Ward had a carry, Antoine Randall had a carry. They ran the option with Randall L and Amizaraway at one time. They were running fun plays, and I forgot that the Pittsburgh, they mixed in a lot of trickery, and obviously the Randall L Super Bowl sticks out. But in this game, they ran a lot of unique stuff, and they actually played a lot more, 4 wide and 3 and 4 wide stuff than I think a lot of teams were doing at this time. There also was a point in this game where there was a 3rd and 22 and the Falcons went I formation, and I just about lost my mind thinking back to the era of football that this was. Yeah. But the actual Steelers offense was fun, and they ran a lot of fun plays. And Tommy Maddox had that, Brett Favre gene where he was a gunslinger. He didn't care about throwing interceptions. Should have probably threw a couple in this one. Probably had another touchdown in this game. Plaxico probably could have had 320 yards in this game, which is crazy to think about, especially in the first quarter. He missed like a 60-yarder touchdown to Plaxico. But the Steelers offense was really fun at this time.
Yeah, and then another one in overtime where Plaxico is held so that he doesn't burn them deep. Between those two, he could have broken Flipper Anderson's record. He ends up with 258 receiving yards, including the first touchdown, which, as you mentioned it, Maddox, a gunslinger. The safety undercuts it for the Falcons and pops right through to Plaxico. 7-0, you have to be feeling good at that point.
That was a great play by Plaxico. Like I said, he missed them for the first quarter for a touchdown, but I had also forgotten too just how much the Steelers dominated this game, like for the stretch of the second through really 50 minutes of the game. Yeah. Outside of a couple broken plays, and I know we'll talk about LeBeau and stuff, but he wasn't there, but the thumbprint was still there. I mean, they really had the game plan I used to play against Vick and Madden, and that was my game plan. Is I'm always bringing corners off the edge, and the Steelers were in Vick's pocket the entire game. Until he broke that late touchdown to tie it at the end there. But I mean, Plaxico was really the guy they were trying to establish early, taking shots downfield, and they connected on that one that probably should have been intercepted on the undercut, but maybe that one just neutralizes the one that he overthrew in the first quarter.
I mean, yeah, again, Plax could have easily gone for mid-300s. The Falcons had Ashley Ambrose and Ray Buchanan both on the other side of 30, holding down starting cornerback for the Falcons, trying to guard 6'5", 26-year-old Plaxico Burress. Both players are former All-Pros, but it seems like that would be an approach that would be rare in today's NFL, to just roll in with the two longer in the tooth, shorter guys against Plaxico.
Yeah, so I looked this up. I wanted just to see how it compared to, this past season. There were only 37 DBs in the entire NFL this year that took a snap at age 30 and over. So really just a little bit over 1 per team. Baltimore had 4 of them. 3 of the guys played for 2 teams, Janoris Jenkins, Andrew Sandeo, and Tremaine Brock, but really only 37 guys were over 30 years old or older that played defensive back. Only 13 were cornerbacks. Wow. So I mean, it's a short shelf life for cornerbacks, and cornerbacks, when it goes in a hurry. I mean, think of how many great DBs and corners we've had that they just don't have it anymore. They're great one year, and then the next year it's over. I remember Asante Samuel being like that. He was really good for a long time, and it was just all of a sudden bad. It just couldn't guard anyone anymore. But yeah, Jonathan Joseph I guess he hung on. He had a couple bounce back years past 30. But I looked it up to see though, to compare, and it's really rare to have 2 older guys. But you didn't need as many DBs as by that. We were in complete transition. But like I said, the Steelers were a team that were running a lot of 3+ wide receiver sets in this, and obviously having a great slot guy like Heinz Ward makes that happen. But they also, Randall is not actually a true flanker or X himself, so it's a weird pairing. But I don't think you'd see that very often now, especially because, like I said, I checked it out, and there were not a lot of older DBs playing in the NFL last season.
Struggled, with Plaxico. Heinz Ward also went for, I think, double-digit catches, over 100 yards receiving. And another thing the NFL hasn't seen in a while is a former XFL quarterback. If P.J. Walker finds success as a starting NFL passer, would that be more or less surprising than what Tommy Maddox did in 2002?
I think it would be less surprising now just because, you don't have to just be a pocket passer anymore like a lot of this, still era was. PJ Walker, a lot more open offenses now. He has some ties to, Matt Rule as well. So, he paired up with him and getting into that system probably can help him. He's mobile, which helps now. So, I think that today's NFL can acquiesce to the non-pocket passer a little bit more, whereas, even if you threw picks back then, they still wanted guys to just stand there and take shots downfield. So, I would say, it'd be less shocking now. But, I remember that year that Cordell started that year, right?
Yeah, and they started 0-2, and that was after they were the 1 seed, losing the AFC title. 3 games in, Cowher makes the switch.
Yeah, I thought Cordell started that year. But, yeah, they still wanted to make guys passers, and I'm sure we'll talk about it with Vic a little bit. But that era was focused on making those guys passers first, which I think is different than now, where I think a lot more guys. I think even Vic would come in the league now. I think he would be handled a lot differently than he was back then. But if PJ Walker would get a chance to play, if Teddy Bridgewater falters, I think that there's still opportunity there. 2 preseasons ago, he was really good, and then really struggled. I think it was last preseason by Chad Kelly completely outplayed him. But he showed a little promise 2 years ago, and then just kind of just washed out last year. So hopefully his second chance will give him some new life. I'm glad that, at least the XFL opened the doors for some of these guys like Donald Barham, Teamu. So, some other guys are getting some chances because of it.
Maddox was definitely the rare exception from that first run of the XFL as far as then really sticking in the NFL afterwards. But Maddox was the first round pick by the Broncos in 92 as the heir apparent to John Elway. And then Elway plays another 7 years. Tommy Maddox becomes an insurance salesman, goes to the arena, XFL. But he could also, as a rhythm passer, it seemed like he fit what Malarkey and he also had Wisenhunt on that staff too. And you had, as you mentioned, you had Randall L., Plaxico, and Heinz Ward. Was this up there as offenses where it was easiest to have success as a passer in 2002?
Yeah, I'd have to check out the landscape a little more, but off the top of my head, just from even watching it, they ran a lot of concepts that you still would see now, which was encouraging. The Falcons didn't do as much of that, but obviously they had Vic, really early in his career, and I don't think they really had a great grasp on how to, handle him as a passer at that time. But yeah, like I said, their offense was actually fun to watch. A lot of the stuff they were doing. Honestly, if Maddox, even for the game he had, he could have played better in this game. Definitely missed some throws and took some chances. But I think going back to that, my recollection may be off. Like I said, being only 20 years old at that time, I have a lot of age on me. But I think I remember him being kind of up and down like that, where he would get hot and cold at certain moments because that's the kind of passer he was.
Yeah, 20 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, didn't play the full season. Cordell Stewart starting the year, but if DraftKings had existed at the time, he did put up the day of his life also had a big wild card later that season too in the victory over the Browns. But we're getting toward 5 o'clock at the end of this game. The broadcast over 4 hours. So you're pushing into the afternoon slate, and if DraftKings existed and you don't have Tommy Maddox, Plaxico Burress, and Heinz Ward, are you thinking you have any chance of taking a tournament?
If you have all 3 of those guys, you win off. So Pro Football Reference actually does DraftKings scoring for retro games.
That's awesome.
And I pulled this up. I pulled up this week. And Plaxico was the highest scoring DraftKings player of the week. Heinz Ward was 3rd and Tommy Maddox was 4th. Now, there also was another stack that week that if you had, you might have been able to compete. So in the same week, the Rams, Mark Bulger threw for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns. And in the same game, Isaac Bruce had 10 catches and 3 touchdowns. So they did rival the stack, but if you had the 3-man stack, it was going to be hard. And then if you somehow, and I don't know how you would have done it leading into this game, but if you somehow would have cross-stacked it with Sean Jefferson, you would have had no chance. Because I looked up Sean Jefferson's season that year. So in this game, Sean Jefferson had 9 catches for 131 yards and a touchdown. It was the only touchdown he scored all year. And he only had 27 catches the whole season. So this was his entire season was in this game. I don't know how you would have arrived on him prior to the game, but if you somehow had that 4-man game stack, you would have there. I don't know how you wouldn't have won the million there.
Yeah, you're running away with it at that point. Sean Jefferson, long in the tooth at that point, but
his son just got drafted, right? His son was just drafted by the Rams.
Yeah, and he's a starter on 2 different Super Bowl teams, the Bledsoe Patriots and the Chargers that got whipped by the Niners. So Sean Jefferson, Vick's best deep threat, and you're probably not stacking Vick with any of his receivers in 2002. Brian Finneran, the only person close to 100 targets, and he was over that. That weekend, you gotten by if you put Azakim in your lineup. 7 for 143 and a touchdown from Joey Harrington. I imagine he's like under 4% owned. And Peyton Manning went into, I mean, he probably would have cost way too much, but 319 and 3 in Philly. I guess a contrarian stud play, but probably still not giving you enough, even if he's priced down at Philly against Jim Johnson. Kevin Falk was the nuts at running back.
Yes.
7 receptions, 108 and a touchdown. If you figured that the Patriots would go visit the Bears at the University of Illinois Stadium in Champaign and go down 27-6 and have to throw their way back, and you went Brady, Brown, Kevin Falk, then maybe you have some money to get, Plaxico and Bruce in there, and you have a shot.
Real fun week looking up those names. I had a blast. I think the guy, I didn't look at his games leading into it, but James Mungro popped up for 100. He had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Remember I think that was the year he had double-digit rushing touchdowns. He had 1 year with double-digit rushing touchdowns where he got some burn for the Colts and had like that 1 year kind of out of nowhere. But I remember writing him up in one of my early fantasy article on like Monte Ball, like attachment to Peyton, running back attachment to Peyton Manning, how valuable it was because like all these guys like scored touchdowns and James Mungro was one of them.
James Mungro, the original Monte Ball, ended up being the take. But it wasn't really till the second half where this game delivered. If you're on DraftKings, pulling this up.
Yeah, I mean, both Falcons touchdowns, the first ones were really kind of just like they didn't have drives. They had a bomb to Sean Jefferson, and Warwick Dunn had like that 60-yard touchdown run. They weren't sustaining drives at all in this game, up until 10 minutes to go.
The 2 teams combined for 1,092 yards, 51 first downs, and 8 touchdowns in a game that ended a tie. The Steelers take the lead. 17-7 at the half, total yardage 270 to just 131 for the Falcons. Tim Lewis, in between the 2 LeBeau eras, had a decent game plan that eventually broke down, but you're playing zone behind 2 waves of blitz, and through 2 quarters, Michael Vick was held in check.
Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised when I went back and watched this. Like, Vick really had no chance. I mean, they were rushing off his left side. They were rushing DBs consistently off his left. Deshae Townsend, Dwayne Washington, those guys were sending corner heat. He was only sacked 3 times, but he had 2 intentional groundings that were like really sacks. Like he just got rid of them and took the intentional grounding. And he had one Houdini-esque getaway. It was like Michael Vick only could have done this. He actually almost threw an interception on the play where he got away and like winged it to the sideline, and someone might have had a shot at it. But they really had a great game plan. He only rushed for, I want to say, like 38 yards, and it really all came on that last touchdown. He really didn't have much to go at all, and he lost a fumble on a scramble too. They really had a great game plan for him. It just really broke down at the end, and I'm sure you'll get to it, but the Steelers had that costly turnover that kind of opened the door for everything.
Yep, right before that turnover, Heinz Ward puts them up 31-17. They eventually go up 34-17 in the fourth quarter, but going into the fourth, 31-17, Heinz Ward gets a 2-point conversion that bumps it from 29 to 31. Do you feel like Heinz Ward's game was more valuable in 2002 than it would be today between the blocking and his skill set as a receiver?
I think Heinz Ward, he would have been good in just about any era. I mean,
Yeah.
really. I mean, and especially now when more wide receivers are on the field than ever before. I mean, more teams would utilize their slot man more. So he could have probably thrived in more systems. But I mean, I feel like Heinz Ward would have been really good no matter what. I mean, that dude was. You hate to have to just be cliche and use the term football player, but that's what that guy was, man. Granted, he wouldn't be cracking back on people and you're getting away with that. He wouldn't be doing that now. But as an actual skill set as a receiver, I mean, he almost won this game in overtime on a screen pass. He probably should have housed it. He kind of stumbled in the open field a little bit and had to cut it back. But I thought he was going to go. It was a jailbreak scenario in OT, and I thought he was going to end it then. And it really they ended up missing a field goal after that. But I thought he was going to end it there on that screen in overtime where he had a monster gain, but kind of stumbled in the open field. So that turf kind of got him a little bit too.
Angle from that game, from the offense's end zone. Keon Carpenter of the Falcons gets his foot out, trips Heinz Ward, and that's why he falls into Alan Faneca and only takes it to the 38, the edge of field goal range, instead of taking it well into field goal range or possibly the distance there. One of the many swings of cruel fate in this game that took win probability from about 98% for the Steelers back to a ball game. He also, especially on that two-point conversion, they run, he's faking motion to one side and then comes back and does a speed out of the backfield. Tommy Maddox rolls out and hits him. Outside of the pre-snap motion, more so the post-snap design reminded me of wildcard game. Nick Foles in Chicago hits Golden Tate on the speed out, and I started to think, is that the modern comp for Heinz Ward, Golden Tate?
That's not a bad one at all. I mean, Golden Tate had a little more like vertical game early in his career probably than Heinz Ward did, but it's not a bad comp at all because of, how he thrived later in his career, the second half of his career. I like that a lot. I love that play on the goal line. I mean, I love those types of plays, those rub routes, those speed outs from the slot, and way more than the 50-50 fade ball. I mean, that stuff still kills me that teams are so inefficiently throwing jump balls up. But I love those. Remember there one year, a couple years ago, with the Jets where Eric Decker, I swear he scored a touchdown on like eight times on the same play. Like they just ran like an inside rub route and he just, and like it was the same play. It's like, all right, man, we know this play's coming. I mean, if you look it up, I swear like 8 of his like 13 touchdowns that year came on the one play. But I'm surprised more teams don't utilize that type of stuff more at the goal line because that's way more successful to me than these jump balls, these big clashers.
Feels like something that never went out of style from like the Bill Walsh playbook, where like all of a sudden Jerry Rice is coming out of like slightly offset in the backfield and running a speed out, and you're just getting like a free score on the goal line. Another modern comp I thought of for Tommy Maddox, good enough arm where he could throw a pretty deep ball when he has the space, enough to stretch field vertically, but when he gets pressure, he's erratic at all levels. The Steelers had the most first half points in the league heading into this game. So very good in the opening script, but outside of the opening script, they struggled a little offensively in the second half. I was thinking Jared Goff.
Yeah, that's not bad either because anyone that you talk about playing in structure. Derek Carr is like that a lot too, but he's more intermediate or has turned more intermediate. The past few years, he pushed the ball downfield a little more with Crabtree and Cooper and those guys. But those guys that once you get them off structure, it's bad news, and that's exactly it. That's exactly how he was. And Carr protects the ball a little bit more too, so it's probably not great. But Goff will throw some picks too. Yeah, that's pretty good. It was like that in the second half. They brought a little more heat. They got to him a little bit more, and that kind of opened the door. But like I said, what really happened? I mean, the Randall fumble was what really kind of set everything off.
Yeah. So 10 minutes left in the game. Steelers getting the ball back on a punt, up 17. They don't end up winning this game. And it starts with a fumble by Antoine Randall, who'd done some good things in the receiving game and had a good return earlier. But when that happened, do you remember it creeping in your head that this game might not be over?
Not really even then, even though I knew the outcome, even watching, it's like, how did they pull this off? Because I don't really remember them being down that late by that many points. And especially when you watch, like I said, the game plan, like they were like Vick was Vick had no answer. Their only 2 touchdowns were kind of a long ball, not really sustaining drives. Even then, it was like they had to be thinking when they fumbled, like, all right, well, we're fine. We're still good. I mean, obviously, it's 3 scores. We've been getting heat all day. If we just protect everything, we're good. And it ended up falling the complete opposite direction.
Bill Cowher coming from a special teams background, but it was a weird year for that unit and a weird game. I mean, Allen Rossum for the Falcons goes for 122 punt return yards in the day, including a long one, setting up the game-winning drive, or the game-tying drive. The Randall L. fumble, extra point, and a field goal blocked. Yep. And Todd Peterson, they signed him to a 4-year deal before the season, and they were so gung-ho about getting a kicker because Chris Brown the previous season led the league and missed field goals. I saw this old Post-Gazette article by Ed Bouchette quoting Cowher after they thought they'd fix the kicking issue by signing. He ends up going back and forth with Chris Brown, who he lets the Texans take in the expansion draft. Cowher says, Heinz Field has claimed a kicker. So and then Chris Brown comes back with, it's not a situation where I was scared to kick at Heinz Field. If Pittsburgh matched, I would have been very happy to stay here and I would have done well at Heinz Field. It's not a situation for me to get out of kicking at Heinz Field for why he left. I know people will say that and they're entitled to their feelings, but Heinz Field had nothing to do with that. Fast forward to this game. Peterson, their new kicker, 2 kicks blocked. He misses 1 right before the end of the first half. Is it just like shocking as a Steelers fan to see them not get that edge in the special teams game? In fact, have it really hurt them?
Yeah, I remember, early on in that stadium, it's still, being a problem to kick there. And I think it still is. I'd have to go back and see if it's really adjusted recently. But, kicking in that stadium in general, the field was terrible that game. And even a couple kicks that were made in that game by both kickers really were questionable on kind of getting there, especially in the one direction. Everything was hooking left for each kickers, and they both snuck one in. So, yeah, it was definitely an event all game. There was a couple of shoddy punts in this game as well. Definitely some real short kicks. And we saw like the one Rossum got to return. The first Randall L kick, too, was not a great punt that he ran back. It was just not a great kicking performance altogether. But, that was a different era, too, for kicking. Even when you go back to 2002, I mean, we were growing up, and, really like a 50-yard field goal was a big deal. Kickers missed, more kicks, inside of 40 yards. Now these kickers now are just machines. I mean, it's not even a big deal to kick a 50-yard field goal anymore. If you miss, like, inside of 40 yards, it's like, what's going on here, even though we see extra points missed. But it's just field goals are a lot more, I feel like, of a crapshoot, even going back to 2002, way more than they are now.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
There's a million things we have to do today, and worrying doesn't need to be one of them. That's why 1 in 9 families use Life 360 for safety to connect to the people that matter most. Join today and get premium features that keep your family protected with real-time location updates, crash detection, and 24/7 roadside assistance. Because let's face it, you're more than just your to-do list, you're a family. So let's live Life 360. Download for free today.
Eventually, the Falcons come back tie. They push it to overtime. Spoiler, this game goes all then 15 minutes in the overtime for the tie. They keep getting to the edge of field goal range, and then they either miss the kick or Bill Cowher says, I'm not kicking a 51-yard field goal. I'll punt it with 5 minutes left in overtime. At one point, Amos Zaraway slips on a run when he's at the edge of field goal range, and the announcers, they say flat out, it's nothing but sand out there, because apparently Heinz Field hosted a high school football game on Friday and a Pitt Panthers game on Saturday. They knew Vick and the Falcons were on the schedule for Sunday. Do you think Pittsburgh found a home field advantage in making the turf garbage?
They could have. You think back to that RG3 Seattle game, but that was a home field. They ruined their own quarterback.
Yeah.
But I mean, the actual field, I don't know if I don't think that was more of the problem for Vick. I think the defensive game plan was good for Vick. Like I said, they sent a lot of pressure off his left side. And like you said, the receivers that he had at that time were not the greatest. But he ended up getting them in the end in the fourth quarter. After the fumble, the Antoine Randall fumble, they scored a touchdown, and he had probably his first best scramble of the day. He ran for like 12 or 13 yards. Algie Crumpler absolutely flatlined a guy on one of the plays, and then they scored like a fullback dive. Warrick Dunn got vultured in that game. Warrick Dunn, his whole career got vultured, but talk about an underrated player Warrick Dunn was. I mean, this guy had 11 years, over 1,000 yards from scrimmage out of 12 played, and I think the 1 year he didn't, he had like 9 and change. Just came short. It was a really underrated player for our era. I don't know if people will go back and ever remember Warrick Dunn as like one of the top running backs in the league. But he was a guy that surrendered a lot of touchdowns inside the 5 because of his size, but was an absolutely electric player. Then Vick had another scramble later in the game that kind of the game tying touchdown. With 50 seconds left or 45 seconds left, which was another just great scramble on his part. I don't think the field was too much of an issue for him, but I mean, there was definitely times it cropped up in the game for players outside of Vick, like you talked about Zaraway and some of the other players out in space.
Even the kickers.
Oh, absolutely, kickers.
I mean, Peterson, it seemed like it hurt the Steelers more in this game than the Falcons to me.
That Jay Feely last field goal attempt was I think all he did was kick dirt on because I think he was trying to hit it low, and if you see the replay on it, he just kicks dirt everywhere.
Yeah, there's mud, there's clouds of sand, but I'm watching it. Vick's shaking the strong safety for the Steelers right before he goes in for the game-tying score, not Troy Polamalu, Lee Flowers. And on those final drives where Vick would dance around, throw to convert like a 3rd and 24, he had 18 of his 38 rushing yards in the final drive. If Troy Polamalu is there, gives that defense a little bit more of a killer instinct.
Yeah, Troy was something, man. When you think of aggressive players, he was that guy. Instinct, aggressiveness. Probably he could have played a lot longer if he wasn't as aggressive as he was. Kind of caught up to him. But man, he was something special then. I mean, obviously there's so many plays that stand out. Obviously the one where he just completely guesses the play and jumps over the line like it's Tecmo Super Bowl stands out. But yeah, definitely he would have been a guy over Lee Flowers.
It shakes Flowers, and then he gets the edge on Dwayne Washington. You had 2 Steelers defensive backs who were very weary at that point in the game, and I felt like there's so many Steelers games later in that decade where a team's starting to get back in the game, and then Polamalu makes either a tackle or a pick or at times like a sack or a forced fumble. Now down the stretch, Falcons tie it, take it to OT. I want to try something I haven't tried in this podcast yet, and it's a game break from JB. So let's see if you remember. I don't remember all these names. Let's see if you remember all of them. That's frankly incredible. Okay. Time to update a couple of games. Let's go to JB. Hey, Sam, you can't keep the Packers down for long. Take a look at Brett Favre here. Looking left first, and for the fade pattern, not there. What does he do? He finds the tight end, Bubba Franks, across the middle. Back on top by 3 on Detroit. Take a look at New York and Minnesota. Kerry Collins. After Minnesota's 25th turnover of the season, they capitalized to the fullback, Charles Stackhouse, his first career touchdown. And the Giants are on top by a touchdown. Back to Sam and Bill. Do you remember all those names? Because I don't remember Charles Stackhouse.
No, definitely not Charles Stackhouse. And absolutely, Big Bubba Franks and, obviously the QBs we know. But Charles Stackhouse was not one fresh in the memory banks.
I'm a Giants fan. Don't remember the guy. Jerry Stackhouse, I do.
Yeah, Jerry Stackhouse. I know him.
So they get to overtime. Steelers keep getting to the doorstep. Falcons get to the doorstep a couple times. Steelers punt with under 5 minutes left. They pass up 3rd and 13. There's actually one point in OT where they have a 3rd and 1 and they just can't convert. Amos Zaraway ran 37 times for 3.3 a carry. It was a totally different Steelers offense from the rest of the early part of the decade, where it was the only thing they could really rely on a ton was the passing game. How tilted were you during the Falcons' final 3 plays on offense? You're leading them in total yards by a ton. Michael Vick bombs it to McCord in the end zone. Lee Flowers barely tips it away. And then on 3rd down, Michael Vick is at the edge of field goal range. He makes a break for it. Joey Porter spying. How hard is your heart beating right there? Because with 2 minutes left in the overtime, you could somehow lose this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, the drive before too. Yeah, I mean, the Pittsburgh, kind of gave it back to them. They had a decent punt return, and then just Atlanta, they had the shot on the bomb, and then you think Vick's just gonna get away for any type of yardage before they try that long field goal that we talked about, where Jay Feely just kicks dirt basically. I mean, they, like I said, the game plan for the Steelers was really good though. For defending Vick scrambling was sound. Completely, and that play was a great testament to it. Joey Porter was there. They had all that. Jason Gilden was in this game. Jason Gilden was a really underrated player. I think Jason Gilden had like 80 career sacks or something. Like, he was really underrated. Probably one of those guys that, like I said, like not quite on Warwick Dunn's level of popularity, but was a really underrated player for that era. It had a lot of success for the Steelers. Obviously they ran through linebackers through that whole stretch of the 90s and the early 2000s. Even beyond that, if you want to count guys past that, like James Ferrier and Larry Foote and guys like that. But they used to just print linebackers there in Pittsburgh. But it was a great game plan, I thought, by the Steelers. They only just gave up some big plays and had some miscues at the wrong times.
Porter finds Vick trying to get to the hole, forces the field goal attempt that'll be blocked by Atlanta. Joey Porter all over the place in this game. The announcers actually openly remarked in overtime, they're like, wow, Bob Whitfield gets away with a hold. Joey Porter's rush side. And then I think Rosen goes, the play-by-play guy says, he's been doing it all game. The play-by-play guy. That's some real tilt when the play-by-play guys. But Michael Vick, they did such a great job stopping him, and it was an impressive defensive game plan. Only 38 yards rushing that day. On the season, Vick had 777 rushing, 8 touchdowns. Culpepper, the next closest underrated QB in the annals of fantasy football history, 609 rush yards and 10 touchdowns from Dante Culpepper. 2 years later, Vick has more than double the next closest guy. Who is the ultimate era-adjusted Konami code?
I think Culpepper was the QB1 this year and the year after. I think 2002 and 2003 he was the QB1. I think he was the last QB to be QB1 in points per game in that. And I think Breeze had 1 year where he double dipped back-to-back years as the QB1 overall, but the 1 year he wasn't QB1 in points per game. I think Culpepper was the last to do it back-to-back years. Yeah. I think 1 year too, Culpepper also had he wasn't the QB1 overall, but he had another QB1 scoring season with like 20 turnovers. And still was a fantasy QB1 just because the rushing acumen is. I think he rushed for 10 touchdowns that year, which was a big swing. Culpepper he's forgotten because a little bit just because the rest of his career and the trajectory was so bad from the start. But he had a stretch there with Minnesota where he was just a Konami beast, and because the key to the Konami code is the Konami code itself just boosts your floor, but when you have guys that add passing, like you had Lamar Jackson this year, like Deshaun Watson has done in his career, like we think Kyler Murray's going to probably be able to do, like that's when you unlock like these mega ceilings, when you have the passing go with the rushing, because the rushing was all about unlocking the floor, like, hey, these guys are better than you think because you see a bad quarterback, but this weighted scoring gives them high floors. Vick was kind of more in that bucket outside of that, that 2010 run as a passer. I think if Vick would have played now, I think he would have had some more success in some other schemes and different things like that. And teams would have used him a little bit better on the designed run game, because Vick was really just a scrambler. Everything was off scrambling, which is the difference between him and like a guy like Lamar Jackson now, where Lamar Jackson is literally getting everything off of designed runs. Right. I mean, you think about it, Lamar Jackson through a year and a half of really playing has 323 rushing attempts, and 82% of them are designed runs. I don't have the data that goes back pre-2010, but I do have it for the Vick years afterwards. And from 2010 to 2013, he was with the Eagles. Just 40% of Vick's runs were designed runs, so half. And 82% of his rushing yardage stemmed from scramble runs. So the Vick was a totally different animal. He was dropping back to pass in passing situations and taking advantage there, where Lamar Jackson is actually having, offenses design runs for him. And we've seen that now with the designed runs creep back in the NFL. Dak Prescott is a guy who's increased his designed run rate, the past 3 years. Josh Allen. So, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a different era now, where we have more athletes that can actually pass playing quarterback, where it was kind of more athletes that they were trying to mask their inability to pass kind of in this era. And we talk about Cordell Stewart getting benched. We talk about Cordell Stewart getting benched to open. He was very similar in that bucket. And yeah, it would have been really interesting to see if Vick, if he was in this era, like how differently his career would have been. Because obviously he had a good career, and I'm not trying to take away from that. But like, if he was handled a little bit differently and not just wedged into trying to be, I think, a complete passer, they could have made his passing better. Like we've seen guys like Colin Kaepernick for years that he kind of had some faults as a passer. That Vick is the same. I think Vick is similar to Kaepernick as a passer, and similar that he had to see the throw to. He had to see the throw to make it, and he had a lot of trouble with trajectory throws and taking stuff off the ball. There's problems that Kaepernick had as well. But Kaepernick was a guy that was super successful because they were able to scheme him into half read throws, high low reads. If you give Vick, I think, some more of that stuff, I think he probably has a little bit of a different career. And then also, if you just give him Deshaun Jackson, he probably has a different career. Yeah. Give him Deshaun Jackson for his whole career. It probably works out.
Sean Jefferson at age, I think, 33.
Brian Finneran
versus Prime D. Yeah, Brian Finneran, who is on the jump ball at the end of the game. Falcons go from game-winning field goal attempt to blocked field goal, and Hail Mary caught by Plaxico Burress at the goal line. Catches it over, or actually technically under the 6'5" Brian Finneran, and down at the 1-inch line. As it happened, did you think he's in?
Well, I'm watching the throw, and it's funny because you could see Plax has like a complete bead on the throw, and there's like no Falcons in the picture yet. And you're just like, well, when is someone going to step up? It's like they all were just hanging out at the goal line, which is, obviously worked out. But I mean, if he catches that ball 1 foot deeper, it's a touchdown. It was really interesting to see how they played it because Plax really didn't it's not like he went and skied over him. Like he basically, he basket caught it, a Hail Mary, which you don't really see very often.
Some wild images right after that. He just Heinz Ward walks up and he's like, wait, are you in? And then just everyone in the Steelers, you see it, really both teams just kind of collapsing in exhaustion.
I forget who the Falcons DB was, but clearly knew he wasn't in and is shaking hands with I think Heinz Ward or Randall right then, and just let him know this is an interesting one, but we're done here.
Yeah, and one of the weirder Stranger games ends in a 34-34 tie. Michael Vick, those early years with Dan Reeves and then going on to Greg Knapp, they try to make it work in the West Coast scheme with Knapp. They make the NFC title a couple of years from there, but it's like a middling / lower end offense. I think he has a better early career if he finds someone like Andy Reid early on.
I mean, absolutely. I think that he was a little hamstrung early in his career by one, the systems he was in, and then we talked about just surrounding fit for playmakers. They really didn't have the downfield burner types that they needed, I think, for him. But yeah, like I said, I think that he was just kind of mishandled a little bit. They tried to make him too much of an actual, rhythm passer, and I don't think that was really what his strengths ever were going to be. But I mean, if you put him in the hands of a guy like Andy Reid, I think obviously it goes a little bit better. But I mean, I don't really know if Andy Reid like changes the whole trajectory at all, because I think he still too wanted him to be more of a passer. I think it was until later in his career, and then you get Deshaun Jackson, you get some pieces that fit, and it really works out. Jeremy Maclin, but yeah, I mean, I think it would have been better than Greg Knapp and Dan Reeves, and, for sure. But it's tough to say, man. It was such a different time. With Vick and how he was handled, and he came kind of out of the blue in terms of athleticism that really wasn't even there, even from the mobile passers we had at that time. I don't know. It's a good question, but I think he would have done a lot better now in today's NFL.
Michael Vick and Tommy Maddox both at the end of the season win their first playoff start. Michael Vick in Lambeau, Tommy Maddox at home hosting. Naturally,
another crazy game.
The one time the Cleveland Browns in this iteration of their franchise make the playoffs, they lose to the Steelers, and in a nail biter, Steelers down 17 points in that game. Tommy Maddox rallies them back. Steelers ended up bowing out in the divisional round to the Titans. But how did it feel as a Steelers fan that year, especially all that had happened? I mean, the previous year you lose as 10-point favorites in the AFC title. But this year, with all that happened, Cordell benched, insurance salesman, the starting quarterback, defense at one of the less reliable versions you'd seen over the years. Did you just feel like you were playing with house money once you got to the postseason?
I mean, they should have been, especially with how they won that first game. I mean, I think I remember that game versus Cleveland where, I mean, Dennis Northcutt dropped a touchdown. I think that would have won that game for the Browns. And that was another crazy game with some, high scoring kind of shootout potential in that game. But yeah, I mean, you just win wacky games, and you have games like this during the season. Like I said, you pull a guy, Tommy Maddox, out of XFL. It's kind of just one of those years where just you kind of were along for the ride, and wherever it went, because you didn't know where the turn was going to be next or where the next drop was going to be. It literally was kind of a roller coaster ride.
Kelly Holcomb puts up over 400 yards passing with his QB whisperer, Bruce Arians, and the Browns. But at the end of the game, the field in Pittsburgh comes in play, catches a pass in field goal range, needs to get out of bounds in time before the clock runs out to kick a game-tying field goal, slips on the Heinz Stadium turf. It's crazy. I'm looking at the last three games the Steelers played, and the last game of the regular season 34-31, then the Browns playoff game 36-33, and then they lost the Titans 31-34. I mean, this was that year, man. They played in a lot of these just bonkers high scoring games in the 30s, which is not what we grew up with Steelers football, like kind of at this time with under Cowher especially. Thanks for coming on the program and chatting about this very entertaining, strange time in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, this is fun, man. This is a unique little podcast you got going on. And I had a blast going back and watching this game and just seeing some of the guys you kind of forget about. You don't forget about them. They just are stored in a different part of your brain. Yeah. And then you see some like Deshae Towns was that for me. I was like, oh man, I remember this dude all the time. Like I said, Jason Gilden was one of those guys like just completely forget about him, and then had a he was a really productive career that he had, and you'll never really hear any mentions about Jason Gilden being an All-Pro or being a Hall of Famer or anything, but the guy had almost 80 sacks in his career. Like that's something to hang your hat on wherever he's at now. Salute to you, Jason Gilden. And I was seeing guys like Brian Finneran and Algie Crumpler. And those guys are fun. Algie Crumpler especially, just because that guy was he just didn't look like a pass catcher at all, And he would get downfield and make these plays though, but it was just he just wasn't, he didn't look dynamic, but he would make these plays and just I just remember seeing him with Vic early in his career, and it was fun to see those guys, and it was a lot of fun, man, going back and chatting about this and reliving some of those games.
This has been another episode of Remember That Game. Please rate, review, subscribe, and check out more episodes.